This Sunday, my interview with James Comey, the former FBI director, on President Trump's honesty.
I'd have serious doubts about his credibility.
On why the president cleared the Oval Office to talk to him about the Mike Flynn investigation.
If he didn't know he was doing something he shouldn't do, why was he kicking out the leadership, including my boss?
And on the FBI's reputation.
And I hope they see the FBI as an institution committed to values.
James Comey this morning on Meet the Press. Plus, President Trump goes after the former FBI director in a speech last night in Michigan.
Comey's worse. Comey's a liar and a leaker.
Is this the kind of help Republicans need to hold on to the House and Senate? Also, the leaders of North and South Korea say they'll work to officially end the Korean War and to denuclearize the peninsula.
What do you think President Trump had to do with it? I'll tell you what. Like, how about everything?
How likely is such an agreement? My guest this morning, Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri. Joining me for Insight and Analysis are NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt, Princeton University's Eddie Glaude, New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd, and Stephen Moore, editorial board member of the Washington Times. Welcome to Sunday. It's Meet the Press.
From NBC News in Washington, the longest-running show in television history. This is Meet the Press with Chuck Todd.
Good Sunday morning. From the moment James Comey first told President-elect Trump about the Steele dossier, to their awkward embrace 2 weeks later at the White House, to their dinner where Comey claims the president asked for his loyalty, Donald Trump and James Comey have had a difficult and adversarial relationship. The president fired Comey in May of last year by his own admission over, quote, this Russia thing. And ever since then, this Russia thing has fueled their mutual contempt. Comey wrote in his book, A Higher Loyalty, that this president is unethical and untethered to truth and institutional values. His leadership is transactional, ego-driven, and about personal loyalty. Never afraid to fight back, President Trump has tweeted that Comey is a proven leaker and liar, that he should be prosecuted, that he is an untruthful slimeball, and that it was his great honor to fire him. This morning, James Comey joined me for a wide-ranging interview where we touched on many issues, including President Trump's credibility, the Steele dossier, and the Hillary Clinton email investigation. And just last night at a campaign-style event in Michigan, we were reminded once again that Comey is never far from the president's mind.
You watch Comey, and you watch the way he lies.
The president lashing out at his former FBI director at a political rally in Macomb County, Michigan last night.
I did you a great favor when I fired this guy. I tell you, I did you a great favor. Because when you look at what was going on at the top of the FBI, it is a disgrace, and everybody in this room understands it.
On a week marked by a diplomatic breakthrough between the leaders of North and South Korea and by high-stakes diplomacy at home, the president spent much of his time consumed by the Mueller probe.
What we really should do is get on with our lives and get on with a lot of things.
But the president is having a hard time moving on. On Thursday morning, he made a 30-minute call to Fox's morning show.
I watched Leakin' Lion Comey last night, and I hated to do it.
On Friday morning, after that historic handshake between the leaders of North and South Korea, the president started his day not by heralding peace talks, but by renewing his attacks on Comey, tweeting, he's either very sick or very dumb. During that phoner on Fox, the president rushed to distance himself from his personal lawyer and confidant, Michael Cohen.
Michael is in business. He's really a businessman, a fairly big business as I understand it. I don't know his business. But this doesn't have to do with me. Michael is a businessman. He's got a business. I would say probably the big thing is his business, and they're looking at something having to do with his business. I have nothing to do with his business.
In addition to being the president's personal attorney, Cohen is an executive vice president at the Trump Organization. Republicans on the House Intelligence Committee released results of their own investigation into Russian influence in the 2016 election, declaring they did not find any evidence of collusion, conspiracy, or coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russians.
I was very honored by the report. It was totally conclusive, strong, powerful. Many things said that nobody knew about.
Very political report, a document that could have been written by the White House.
Trump's fixation on his fired FBI director has persisted since Comey's dismissal nearly a year ago.
What about Comey? Do you watch him on the interviews? What about Comey?
The president suggested he may intervene again.
If our Justice Department was doing the right thing, they'd be a lot tougher right now on those people because there's tremendous crime and corruption on the other side.
And joining me now is the former director of the FBI, James Comey. His new book is A Higher Loyalty, Truth, Lies, and Leadership. Director Comey, welcome to Meet the Press.
Great to be with you.
Let me start with some news over the last couple of days. The House Republicans put out the House Intelligence Committee report. I'm just curious if you believe it proves what the president says it proves. He claims that this report proves there's no evidence that the Trump campaign colluded, coordinated, or conspired with Russia, and that it was all a big hoax by the Democrats based on payments and lies. Is that your interpretation?
That is not my understanding of what the facts were before I left the FBI, and I think the most important piece of work is the one the special counsel is doing now. This strikes me as a political document.
Did the House Intelligence Committee at all serve a good investigative purpose during all this, in your observations?
Not that I can see.
Just totally got too politicized?
Yeah, and it wrecked the committee, and it damaged relationships with the FISA court, the intelligence communities. It was just a wreck.
When the president says, I have nothing to do with this Russia thing, I know it's something you've heard him say in private. What do you think he means when he says that?
I do not know. I think it's an effort to try to undermine the credibility of the investigation that the special counsel is conducting, but beyond that, I don't know.
Did you, when you first met with him that first time in Trump Tower, when did your antenna go up? Did you treat him suspiciously? Were you going into that meeting concerned based on other stuff you knew?
Yeah, I was concerned about the nature of his commitment to truth-telling based on some of the things I'd seen during the campaign. But I went in trying to see what he was like as a leader and didn't see things that disturbed me until the lack of questions about what do we do next to protect the country.
When you told him the contents of the Steele dossier, did you get the impression it was the first time he'd ever heard those allegations?
Yes, and I didn't give him the briefing on the whole Steele dossier. My assignment was to brief him on a small part of it that was salacious and personal, and my sense was I didn't get a sense that he knew about those.
When I want to re-ask a question that Reince Priebus asked you, and you said in your memo, why include that salacious part? If it was something that you thought was, not that necessary to the investigation, or did you think it was important that he knew?
We thought it was important that he knew, and I say we, meaning all the intelligence chiefs that put together the intelligence community assessment. We thought it was important that he know because we knew, and we don't want to be holding that back from the new president, and also the FBI's role is counterintelligence, and so we do a defensive briefing, whether or not something's true, just to let the person who might be the target of a leverage effort, of an effort by an adversary to gain advantage over him, know that we have this information.
You called him in the book unethical and untethered to the truth. Based on that, does that mean you think it would not be wise for him to sit down with Bob Mueller?
That's a great question. That's one only he can answer and his lawyers can answer. It would be important for a lawyer and client, especially this client, to have a real hard conversation about that. I hope that he will allow Director Mueller to complete his work. Whether that includes an interview or not is up to him.
You've been a prosecutor most of your professional life. Is he a witness that you would find credible?
I'd have serious doubts about his credibility.
The President of the United States?
Yes.
Whether he were under oath or not?
Correct. And sometimes people who have serious credibility problems can tell the truth when they realize that the consequences of not telling the truth in an interview or in the grand jury would be dire, but you'd have to go in with a healthy sense that he might lie to you.
If Mueller is following Justice Department guidelines that sitting presidents cannot be criminally charged, then doesn't that mean that so long as Mr. Trump is in the White House, he will never be considered a target of this investigation, only a subject?
Yeah, there's logic to that. I don't know whether that's the logic of what I've read in the newspaper about him being told he's a subject, but that would logically follow. If you can't be indicted, given that a target is someone on whom there's substantial evidence, enough evidence to charge, then you could never be if a president can't be indicted.
So in this case, and that is Justice Department guidelines, that a president, right, the Justice Department operates under the guidelines that a sitting president can never be indicted.
My understanding is that's the current Office of Legal Counsel opinion in the department.
Was Hillary Clinton ever a target or a subject during the investigation?
Sure, she was a subject of the investigation.
But not a target?
Correct.
And why was that?
Because we didn't develop substantial evidence to support a criminal prosecution against her.
So at no time she was ever considered a target?
Correct.
Okay. Let me ask you, since you left on May 9th, what percentage would you say of what you know about the Russia investigation, what you know about the facts, what you believe the facts are about Russian interference, what percentage of what you would say is in the public domain right now?
That's one I can't answer. I wouldn't answer anyway, but I don't have the math in my head, even if I were inclined to answer it.
All right, let me ask it this way. When the public does learn everything you know, is it going to be something that will be a no-brainer to the public?
It's an excellent second way to ask it. I'm not going to answer that one.
Why wouldn't you answer that? Do you believe what you know is something that the public reasonably will be able to understand, and it won't be foggy?
The reason I'm giving you these answers is I'm duty-bound not to talk about what I learned during the investigation before I left, and I don't know what's happened since. It's possible things that I knew have changed since then.
Right.
So it's just, I can't do it without crossing the lines. I'm obligated to abide.
Have you learned new things since you left from the media?
Learn all kinds of new things.
No, on the investigation.
I think so, although I love the media, but I always take it with a grain of salt because I know there are no leaks coming out of the special counsel's office. So by necessity, nobody who really knows what's going on is talking.
I want to ask you about Mike Flynn. General Flynn pled guilty to making a false statement to the FBI regarding these December conversations with then Ambassador Kislyak of Russia. In the Washington Examiner, they report that according to sources familiar with meetings that you had, that you told lawmakers when you were still director of the FBI, that FBI agents who interviewed Flynn did not believe that Flynn had lied to them or that any inaccuracies in his answers were intentional. If that's the case, what did he plead guilty to?
Yeah, an example of how you can't believe everything you read in the media.
This is not true.
Not true, and I don't know what people heard me say, if they're reporting it accurately, what they heard me say, they misunderstood, but that's not accurate.
On the Mike Flynn plea deal, as a prosecutor, some people have described it as an incredible sweetheart deal. Would you describe it that way?
No, I wouldn't describe it either way because I can't see what's on the other side of the wall. That is, what is the evidence and what's the nature of his cooperation?
When you were invited to dinner by the president on July 27th, that afternoon.
January 27th.
Excuse me, January 27th. Thank you for correcting me on that. The day before, then Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates had briefed the White House that Mike Flynn had lied to the FBI. When you got that call to have dinner with the president, did you think going in he was going to ask you about Flynn?
No, I worried that it might come up. And if you've seen my memo, I made clear to note it did not come up at all.
Now, it does come up in February, and he says, can you lay off Mike Flynn? Why didn't you tell him that was inappropriate?
That's a great question. I've asked myself that a bunch of times. I think because I was so focused, first shocked, and so focused on trying to remember his exact words and standing there alone in the Oval Office that it didn't occur to me at the time.
It was the reason I asked it. You corrected Reince Priebus on the proper channels to use to ask about FISA warrants. You never once corrected the president about different ways he should be handling things. Is that just, why was that?
Probably a couple things. I think it's harder to correct the president. And second, you got to remember the atmosphere. He had just kicked out my boss, who had tried to linger, the Attorney General, and still been booted out of the Oval Office. And so you have to realize that if he didn't know he was doing something he shouldn't do, why was he kicking out the leadership, including my boss?
If you plead guilty to lying to the FBI as a cooperating witness, are you ever a good witness on the stand? Does that mean you would ever use them as a witness on the stand? How are they credible if you plead guilty if you basically plead guilty to lying?
No, you can. I mean, plenty of witnesses do it and are credible to a jury or a judge. They've acknowledged their wrongdoing, and plenty of people who tell the truth also lie at times, and so he's accepted responsibility. And it depends on what other evidence you have to corroborate the account of that witness.
I guess I'm asking, is it more likely he had to have something material that the special prosecutor wanted to get the deal that he got?
Yeah, too hard to answer from the outside, Chuck.
There's just
it's just all speculation. I mean, that is both the challenge and also the great thing about a special prosecutor conducting an investigation with no leaks. You do not know what he has or where he is.
All right, I want to ask you about something that President Trump said last night about Vladimir Putin and this lawyer that was at this infamous Trump Tower meeting. Here it is.
Putin and the group said, you know, this Trump is killing us. Why don't you say that you're involved with government so that we can go and make their life in the United States even more chaotic?
So the president last night is perhaps he's speculating that Vladimir Putin is now telling his folks, hey, yes, say you did cooperate. And the lawyer he's referring to is Natalia Veselnitskaya, who was the woman at the center of the infamous Trump Tower meeting in July of 2016. What does that tell you?
So Putin's instructions are to falsely implicate yourself in conspiring with Americans?
Is that what you heard?
I don't know exactly what to make of that, but that's one interpretation of what he said.
Does that give you hope that he actually now sees that Vladimir Putin is trying to play games with the United States?
It doesn't give me any hope that he's seeing or thinking clearly.
Corey Lewandowski, a former campaign manager of Donald Trump, criticized the FBI, saying when they hired Paul Manafort, somebody who the FBI we now know interviewed in 2014, that he thinks the FBI should have been obligated to tell the Trump campaign Paul Manafort was potentially compromised and somebody they shouldn't associate with. Is that the FBI's responsibility, and should it be?
Yeah, I'm not going to comment on Manafort in particular, but in general, that's not the FBI's job. The FBI does background work on government appointments and government hires, but not to private entities.
I want to ask you about the Clinton email investigation. Starting in October, you say in your book that Deputy Director Andrew McCabe told you something about Anthony Weiner and his laptop and something involving the Clinton in early October. And then there's a sort of a gap. You don't explain why nothing, and then you sort of fast forward to October 27th. What happened in the intervening time there? Why didn't your antenna go off sooner going, whoa, Anthony Weiner, what? We better get on top of this.
Yeah, I remember somebody, and I think it was the Deputy Director, Andrew McCabe, saying something to me early in October, I think. And I didn't index on it because how on earth could there be a connection between Anthony Weiner and Hillary Clinton's emails? And so I don't remember even noting it in my head as a follow-up. And the next thing I remember is the team coming back to me. Actually, Andy emailed me at 5:30 in the morning on October 27th saying the team needs to meet with you, and met with them that morning and got the full briefing. I don't know exactly what happened in between. I assumed, it wasn't conscious, but I think I must have assumed the team was following up to figure out if there's a connection between Weiner and Clinton.
And I want to finally ask you a final question about Loretta Lynch. You write about your concerns about unverified information that you thought could embarrass the Obama Justice Department, Loretta Lynch, and it had to do with some speculation that's now been out there that supposedly, and we now think it was a false set of emails that seemed to indicate she had promised the Clinton kid, don't worry, nothing's going to happen here. I'm curious, you were worried about it. Why didn't you ever bring it up to her or the Deputy Attorney General?
I don't think I can talk about what contact we made with the leadership of justice about that. And so I have to stop there. And by the way, I don't agree with your predicate. I can't describe it because it's classified. I'm just not, by my silence, agreeing with your predicate that it was false documents.
I guess, but in your book, you sort of leave it out there as a hanging meatball, that she, that you imply that she's compromised.
No, I don't.
Was Attorney General Loretta Lynch compromised?
No, I don't believe that. And that's what's so hard about describing. It is implied in the book. You realize it comes across that way in the book. Yeah, I wrote at least twice in the book that I had no reason to believe Loretta had acted improperly, and I stand by that. But this was a factor in my decision-making, so I had to describe it as best I could.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Between that and then the Clinton tarmac meeting, which you said at first you thought it was absurd that it was an issue, but you saw it had gotten traction on cable, why didn't you tell her why didn't you recommend to her or to Sally Yates she should recuse herself? That's the cleanest way out of this.
Yeah, that's a great question. And maybe I should have. But before we had a chance to have a conversation about it, she announced publicly that she would not recuse herself, but would instead accept my recommendation and that of the career prosecutors. And so at that point, then I have to make a decision. Do I stand with her? I like her very much, but do I stand with her to announce this, or do I announce it separately?
I'm going to close with this. Susan Collins, last week on the show, I asked her about your book. Here's what she said. I'm curious to get your reaction to what she said.
I cannot imagine why an FBI director would seek to essentially cash in on a book when the investigation is very much alive. He should have waited to do his memoir.
should you have waited?
I hope she'll read it and see that it's not about the investigation. It's about not even about Donald Trump. It's about something much broader that I thought it was important to talk about now.
I was just going to say, what's the goal for the reader? What do you hope the reader takes away about Donald Trump? And what do you hope the reader takes away about the FBI?
I hope the reader takes away that Donald Trump and Barack Obama and George W. Bush and others illustrate something about the importance of values in the life of this country and about what leadership can and should be. And I hope they see the FBI as an institution committed to values and caring deeply about being separate from the political tribes in this country.
Director Comey, I would love to go farther, but there's so many questions you say you can't answer due to this investigation. So I guess it means, can I ask you this? Do you believe that Director Mueller is mindful of the political calendar as he goes through, and that the closer things get to an election, the more investigations can play an outsized role, fair or unfair?
I'm sure he knows all of that. He's definitely attentive to the calendar, and like all good prosecutors, wants to finish as quickly as he can.
Okay. Director Comey, good luck on your book tour. I would say good luck with book sales, but I think based on book sales, you don't need any more luck.
Thank you, Chuck.
You got it. When we come back, I'll talk to the panel about James Comey, President Trump, and the Mueller investigation. Well, we are back. Panelists here, lots to chew over. Eddie Glaude, chair of the Center for African American Studies at Princeton University, NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Casey Hunt, the New York Times columnist Maureen Dowd, and Stephen Moore, editorial board member at the Washington Times and a former senior economic advisor to the Trump campaign. Welcome all. Good to see the two of you. We haven't seen you guys in a while. Maureen, I'm going to start with you. Comey and Trump. What do you make? Is this Jalbert-like? Is this Les Mis-like in your mind?
Well, with Macron this week, we saw Trump's primate male dominance moves, which he also tried on Comey. You asked Comey about why he didn't speak back to Trump. Mm-hmm. And Comey is a very fascinating figure for Washington because usually you get in trouble from an absence of rectitude, and he's in trouble from too much rectitude. You know, his tortuous explanations, he can't see that what he did was wrong because he's so wrapped up in his image of himself at Ashcroft's bedside and as being the honest man that he can't see that it's about his image. But, you know, the funny thing about Comey is that it's such a great troll because he's becoming rich and selling all these books to Trump haters when they blame him for not making Hillary president. Hillary says he shivved her.
Stephen, what'd you hear?
Look, the last thing he said to you was that, I want to make sure I get this exactly right, that the FBI is committed to values and honor. I think this man has so politicized the FBI and really besmirched the reputation of the FBI with this salacious book that was so personal. I agree that it should have come out after the investigation. And look, I think from people on the right, like me, I don't think he has any credibility anymore. And I agree with you. This is all about selling books. And, you know, he is, you know, I've said this before, but, you know, hell hath no fury like an FBI director scorned. And this is personal. You know, he comes across as just a personal animosity to Trump. And I don't think the book is going to have a lot of lasting influence.
Eddie.
Well, I think you can hold two claims at once. That is to say that he's trying to sell books, and that he is absolutely right about the claim that he doubts the credibility of Trump. That Trump has proven over and over again a propensity to have an uneasy relationship with the truth. He lies.
At a minimum.
I thought it was interesting. He admitted that he went into his first ever meeting with him questioning whether that he was ever going to be truthful.
Right. So
he prejudged.
Right. So no matter what our political leanings are, whether you're a Trump supporter or a Trump critic, I think the facts of the matter are very clear. Trump lies. And Comey's book, whether it's to sell money or whatever, is making very, very clear that the man is...
If you believe them.
I really can't tell anymore, honestly, which camp hates James Comey more. Exactly. Is it the people that worked for Hillary Clinton or people who are now Trump supporters? And, I mean, this book feels like one of the many political biographies that, politicians put out about themselves. This is James Comey selling himself as the embodiment of honor and loyalty and the opposite of everything on both sides of the aisle. And I'm curious, his numbers, his poll numbers have whipsawed back and forth among Republicans and Democrats. I mean, he was one of the most hated figures by Democrats during the campaign. That's since jumped back around. I'm interested to see if he comes out of this with any.
Well, see, this is exactly my point, though. Even, going back to the email investigation, I mean, that his treatment of that, in my opinion, was total. And I say this as a Republican, and it did help Trump win the election. But the way he treated the whole email investigation was political, in my opinion.
Bob Mueller still has some positive views as far as the public is concerned. And I thought this poll here, if I were the president, I'd be concerned here. Views of the Mueller investigation from Fox News here. Will Mueller find President Trump committed crimes or impeachable offenses? A majority, 56%. But what was interesting here is more than 1 in 5 Republican voters now believe. And you could say maybe they're the never Trump Republicans that believe this, Maureen. But that shows you that Mueller has kept his credibility. Comey may be challenged. Mueller still is not.
Well, I think, again, this is one of the most fascinating kind of personality collisions that Washington has ever seen. You've got this former Marine, Boy Scout, completely straight arrow, and then you've got Trump, who is the opposite of that.
I want to get into the investigation a little bit. We know the president got fixated about Michael Cohen, and he wanted to make it clear Michael Cohen's businesses. And then this pops up over the weekend in grocery stores. The front page of the National Enquirer, we know the president has a personal relationship with the owner of the National Enquirer, and there it is, Trump's fixers, secrets and lies. Casey Hunt, this looks like the beginning of the president's attempt to separate from Michael Cohen.
We've been watching this almost play out in public, the president trying to decide if he's going to try and essentially dismantle Michael Cohen or if he's going to try to cozy up to him in the attempt to make sure that he doesn't essentially side with Bob Mueller and give up everything. And it seems as though we are moving in the opposite direction, that the assumption is now that Michael Cohen is likely to flip. He wants to avoid prison, so they have to mount a campaign to undermine his credibility.
Steve Moore, how concerned should Trump supporters be about Michael Cohen?
Look, I thought the raid on Cohen's office was a bridge too far for this investigation.
Do we know that, though? We don't know why they did it. We don't know the evidence
most
yet.
fair-minded people think it was pretty outrageous it was an invasion of civil liberties. But I want to go back to this point you made, which is really, I think, an important one about, how many Republicans believe that Trump is in trouble. I think the reason that this report that came out by the Republicans in Congress about the investigation saying there was no collusion is a really important point here, because it basically is saying this is now a partisan, the only way that they're going to get Trump is what happened after Watergate when Republicans turned on Nixon. That's not happening now. I think it's become it's being portrayed as a partisan witch hunt against Trump, and I actually happen to believe that's true.
Well, the House Republicans made it more partisan, therefore it makes it partisan?
No, it just means
I'm sort of confused by that logic.
Unless Democrats can convince Republicans that there's something here, then I don't think the investigation is going to
And that's what's interesting about the 1 in 5, right? Even though 1 in 5 may believe that he has committed impeachable offenses, do they care? Right? Do they care if will they hold him accountable for it? I don't think they will.
Well, and I think that's part of why the way this conversation is going is so potentially dangerous, because you say this invasion of Cohen's office was an invasion of his civil liberties. We don't have all the facts to know that. We are supposed to be a country that operates under the rule of law, and now nobody believes the same set of facts. The people who are in public office are undermining our institutions that apply the rule of law.
Right.
Is it possible that Republicans will ever change their minds because they have a completely different set of facts?
I'm going to have to pause the conversation there, and we'll pick it up in a few minutes. That I promise. Coming up, though, could North and South Korea and the U.S. really agree to rid the peninsula of nuclear weapons and officially end the Korean War? A lot depends on President Trump. Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri, who sits on the Intelligence Committee, joins me next. Welcome back. We saw an historic moment this week on the Korean Peninsula. But for all of the images of the leaders of North and South Korea smiling and shaking hands, many experts do remain skeptical about how close we really are to an official end to the Korean War, and more importantly, a denuclearized North Korea. Much will depend on President Trump and his planned meeting with Kim Jong-un. Last night at his rally, Mr. Trump left no doubt who was responsible for the progress, in his view, so far.
They were saying, what do you think President Trump had to do with it? I'll tell you what. Like, how about everything?
Joining me now is a member of the Intelligence Committee, Republican Senator Roy Blunt of Missouri. Senator Blunt, welcome back to Meet the Press. Well, let me start with there very quickly. Is the president responsible for everything we've seen here so far between the two Koreas?
You know, actually, I think the president's responsible for a lot of it. He's a different personality, clearly, than the presidents who have tried to deal with North Korea before. Mm-hmm. You've really got four people here that are principal, that are in many ways different. The president, President Moon, Kim himself, the unbelievably almost empowered leader of China.
Right.
All of the dynamics between them going to be really important in whether we can get to a conclusion here or not. I will say for the last couple of years, including that would be the last 6 months of the Obama administration, North Korea has clearly been one of the principal intel committee topics to try to figure out what they were doing and how they were doing it.
And that's what I'm curious about here. Why do you believe Kim Jong-un is so comfortable coming to the table right now, right? I mean, that to me, we have to answer that question. We have to know the answer to that question before the president sits down with him, don't we?
Well, he is incredibly confident. You can tell that. He is very confident of his own ability to drive media. Now, you view that all in the context that he is truly a tyrannical dictator. Don't let that...
You didn't believe he was a rational actor. I mean, how do you trust dealing with this guy? All of a sudden, the president's like, I can handle this. Are you comfortable that Kim Jong-un is a rational actor?
You know, I think what I have tried to say in the past, he's impetuous. He's not very old. He hasn't been exposed to much of the world. And that's a very scary combination to somebody who is testing nuclear weapons.
Where would you put yourself here? There is some skeptics here. Look, Kim Jong-un's grandfather got Bill Clinton, and some would say snookered him. Kim Jong-un's father, some would say snookered George W. Bush. How concerned are you that this is just another game that Kim Jong-un, I think Bret Stephens wrote, he's got a peace wall, peace bridge to sell you type of thing? Do you think how much skeptical?
Well, I think we need to be very skeptical. And in 2012, the Obama administration also, we've got a series here of our leaders trying to deal with these tyrants and not having very good success in doing that. They will not be truthful just because they want to be truthful. I think there has to be some determination that the verification is absolute, that the North Koreans walk away with something out of this. And frankly, everybody, including the Chinese, has to keep the economic pressure on.
Is there a commitment that Kim Jong-un is going to ask for that you fear the president, that you would tell the president, don't give on this, please don't give on this? What would this be in your mind?
Well, I think our presence in South Korea
that's the last thing
continues to be essential. And we have to be thoughtful about that. And also I was interested that Kim, for the first time publicly, was willing to admit that his country is not everything it should be, talking to the South Koreans about their infrastructure.
But he didn't televise any of these meetings to his own people. Does that concern you that this is a media event for us and he's not selling his people on it?
I don't know that it was televised, but it was actively covered immediately in the newspapers in North Korea, which would have been different than the past. So he is out there saying, we are behind you, and many are economically behind you, our infrastructure is behind you. Everybody knows they can barely feed their country, and they don't have money, that they don't have currency the rest of the world accepts, and so it's a critical time for him. But I think we have to be very skeptical. This is very much whatever they say. I'm not sure you can trust it, but you certainly have to verify it.
And we sort of have to figure out how to verify it. Let me ask you about another nuclear issue, and that is the Iran deal. The defense secretary testified on Capitol Hill this week and gave a very interesting answer about his views on the Iran deal. Here it is. I'm curious what you think.
I've read it now 3 times, all 156 pages or whatever it is, and I will say that it is written almost with an assumption that Iran would try to cheat. So the verification, what is in there, is actually pretty robust.
Now, Secretary Mattis is being careful, perhaps not to say telling what the president to stay in or out, but he's making a case for staying in. Does that interpretation give you more confidence in the Iran deal?
You know, if we stay in, I would be very much where President Macron, Prime Minister Macron was, where he said, we want to stay in the deal, but here are the three things that absolutely have to change. It was one of the more interesting, we're definitely in the deal, but here are the three things that have to change.
So that gave you some confidence.
Well, it's actually the three things the president has been saying need to change in the deal as well. And also remember, Iran is a bad actor in lots of areas, and the Iran deal doesn't cover all their bad activities. We can do sanctions on Iran even if you stay in the Iran deal that doesn't relate to nuclear. Iran is very dangerous, and they are on a certain path to have nuclear weapons capability in 10 years unless the government would, in a very unlikely way, change its view of itself and the world.
You know, sometimes it's weird how we're treating Kim Jong-un versus how we treat the Iranians. Kim Jong-un essentially murdered an American citizen in Otto Warmbier. It's very possible the way he was treated over there. He was essentially murdered.
Plus probably his own brother and his uncle.
He has murdered other people. He has starved his own people. The Iranians don't starve their own people. It is, you know, and yet we're sort of now feeling comfortable cozying up with Kim Jong-un and demonizing the Iranians. It just feels like we're sending some odd messages around the world.
Well, I don't know, Chuck. I think you want to be sure you learn the lesson of North Korea, which is don't let countries that have bad inclinations all over the world wind up with nuclear weapons. We are with Iran right now where we would have been with North Korea 15 years ago, and it's foolish to let Iran become another North Korea. And we're not dealing with Kim Jong-un because we think he's a good guy.
A couple of quick political questions. The Mueller protection bill went through the Judiciary Committee. If it hits the Senate floor, are you inclined to support it?
No.
Right now, under no circumstance.
Under no circumstance.
All right. And
now also, and I've given lots of public advice on this to the White House, that they would be foolish not to let Mueller complete this investigation.
Gotcha.
But I think there's a serious question here about how much the legislative branch can manage the executive branch. And if we want to have our own investigator, we could create a law that does that, but we've chosen not to do that.
And I got to ask you about your home state governor, Eric Greitens. Most Republicans in the state seem to want him to resign. Is his presence going to negatively impact Republicans on the ballot in 2018 in Missouri?
I think we have to let the situation play out. You know, obviously what the governor's accused of is very concerning, but there's both a legal process and a legislative process designed to deal with that. And I have confidence that both of those will reach the proper
You don't think he should
conclusion.
resign yet?
I don't think it's my job to decide whether he should resign yet or not. But I think he should have.
Is it in the best interest of the state of Missouri for him staying in there right now?
Voters voted for him. There are two ways to deal with these issues. One is the legal process going on. The other is the legislative process. There's no reason not to have confidence in both of those.
You seem to be very hesitant to call for. You're about the only Republican hesitant to call for his resignation.
Well, I think when you reach conclusions without allowing people to be fully heard, that's not a good thing. And you know, the governor ran on the basis that he had a lot to say about everybody, bad about everybody in politics, but he did get elected. And there is a way to deal with these issues that I think is more appropriate than a bunch of politicians saying what ought to happen.
Senator Roy Blunt, Republican from Missouri. As always, sir, thanks for coming, sharing your views. Appreciate it. When we come back, the spread between what Americans want the country to be and what we believe we actually are.
Data Download is brought to you by Lyrica.
Welcome back. Data download time. There's a big disconnect in America between who we want to be as a country and who we think we actually are. A new report from the Pew Research Center takes a look at both our ideals and how the political system functions today. On our ideals, 84% of those surveyed said it's important that the rights and freedoms of all Americans are respected. And yet only 47% right now think That actually describes the country well right now. 61% say it's important for the tone of political debate to be respectful, yet only a quarter of Americans, 25%, think we actually live up to that now. On the political system itself, 83% believe it's important for elected officials to face serious consequences for misconduct. Only 30% believe that actually happens. 78% think it's important for Democrats and Republicans to work together, while only 19% think they do. That's a 59-point gap between our ideal and reality. And see, that's the big picture here. Because there are some differences between how Democrats and Republicans view these issues. In fact, only 37% of Democrats think everyone has an equal opportunity to succeed in America. For Republicans, though, that number jumps to 74%. Only 38% of Democrats believe the rights and freedoms of all people are respected, while 60% of Republicans say they are. And the things that members of both parties do agree on, it doesn't exactly bode well for the country. Less than a third of Democrats and Republicans think politicians face consequences for misconduct, and very few members of either party think Democrats and Republicans are working together. A study like this requires a serious look in the mirror, not just by our politicians, but by all of us. Yet this isn't all doom and gloom. In fact, it's heartening that there's general agreement among Americans about what we believe the country should aspire to be. But by our own standards, we're falling short. When we come back, Endgame, what did the House of Representatives chaplain do to get himself fired?
Coming up, Endgame and Postgame. Brought to you by Boeing. Continuing our mission to connect, protect, explore, and inspire. Endgame. Brought to you by Boeing. Continuing our mission to connect, protect, explore, and inspire.
Back now with Endgame, the two Koreas, Stephen Moore. I want to put up something here. I want the whole table to here, which is there's skepticism left and right. I thought this was a good example. Brett Stevens, some would call him a neoconservative. He said, Kim Jong-un has a peace bridge he'd like to sell you, and he goes on to talk about all the other failed times that were there. Then you have a Richard Cohen in the Washington Post writing, Trump will exit the North Korea summit a failure because he says North Korea without a nuclear arsenal is like Saudi Arabia without oil. Point is, why do we think Kim Jong-un's ever going to give up nukes?
That's a good question. Look, thank you for reminding us in your interview with the senator that this is a tyrant. This is a man who has murdered his own people. There's no freedom in North Korea. And his father, as you said, starved to death tens of thousands of his own people. So this is not a good person. We shouldn't normalize him in any way. I do worry a little bit that Moon is kind of, I don't want him to be Neville Chamberlain here.
Moon meaning the president of South Korea.
Yeah.
He's too anxious?
Trump for that matter, or any American politicians. This is a bad guy. Now, the only reason North Korea matters, I mean, this is one of the poorest countries in the world. And the only reason they matter is because they do have a nuclear weapon. And I will say this, if Trump, with the leaders of South Korea, can disarm North Korea, that will be a huge bonus for Trump. I think it's a huge advance for freedom and security.
As President Trump himself will tell you. I mean, it was something else last night. Me.
Well, the crowd was also screaming Nobel, chanting Nobel. Yosemite Sam getting a Nobel Prize.
You've seen this before, though. Presidents, I think they get... Look, this is not new, except he's probably just more outspoken. He wants this big moment. They all want their grand moment, whether it was Jimmy Carter with Begin and Sadat, Bill Clinton with the handshake with their... I mean, they want these great man moments.
Well, it's going to be really fascinating because you've got the 71-year-old and the millennial, but they have a lot in common. They're both these spoiled scions. They got the family business. They have a talent for lying and cheating, and they love fawning in those dear leader meetings, except that Kim goes farther on the fawning thing because he had his uncle killed partly because the uncle was clapping half-heartedly for him.
And apparently Kim Jong-un's a better golfer.
Right. The thing here, we have every reason to be skeptical, Chuck. Yeah. But I'm glad people aren't talking about how big their buttons are anymore. Yeah. And that's really important.
The dialogue has been elevated.
It's been elevated. And then the second thing is this. I remember in October of 1990 when East Germany and West Germany unified, and no one thought that was possible. No one imagined it ever to be possible. It marked supposedly the end of the Cold War. So here we are. I don't know who President Kim is in his particulars outside of the general kinds of descriptions we have of him as a bad actor, as a tyrant. Yeah. But what we do know is that on that island, on that peninsula, there are people with interest, just as China has interest, just as Japan has interest. And so what will happen, we don't know. But I do know in 1990 something happened that we never thought could happen.
I'm with you there, and I just think having that moment, just that handshake moment, you're like, well, it's something I didn't think I'd see in my lifetime.
Right. I mean, my big question, just quickly, is China. And is it in their interest? And how much are we in our, and how much is President Trump essentially pushing or allowing the global order to shift towards China?
I think they want a divided Korea that's denuclearized because they fear, I think, a united Korea power.
They don't want North Korea denuclearized. They're the ones who've enabled, this is the Trump doctrine.
I think they fear
China enabled North Korea to have the weapon in the first place.
All right, I want to move to the House chaplain, Casey Hunt. This is your beat. I don't want to make this. I don't want to make this a theological debate inside the Catholic Church. It just seems like, as my executive producer put it the other day in a meeting, and 2 years before the breakout of the Second American Civil War, they even disagreed on who the chaplain of the House of Representatives to be. It just seems symbolic of a ridiculously polarized era.
I think that is a good way of looking at it. And frankly, how this spilled out into the public is also a product of our incredibly polarized, the House of Representatives. Democrats getting very angry about this. Historically, there have been more Catholic Democrats than Catholic Republicans. That's not true anymore. And I do think that, the Speaker has put himself in a situation where whoever the next chaplain is going to be is likely going to have to be a Catholic.
They now have to have it a Catholic. What do you make of all this? You epitomize the debates inside the Catholic Church sometimes in your column.
Well, I think that Paul Ryan decided that he didn't really need a chaplain anymore because the House Republicans have already sold their souls to President Trump.
Wow. Is that your mic drop?
Yep.
So mic drop.
I will say, being Catholic is it's a very important part of Speaker Ryan's identity, which is part of why this surprised me.
The whole thing is surprising because of that.
I grew up in the Josephite tradition.
All right. I gotta go. We're running out of time. See, a theological debate broke out. Thanks for watching. We'll be back next week because if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
You can see more Endgame in Postgame, sponsored by Boeing, on the Meet the Press Facebook page.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.